parts of the world. Since last 2 days, we have been having wonderful sessions while discussing the concepts, methods, and debates. Now, today we have our focus on debates in philosophical counseling. That's what we are trying to engage with since morning. Some of you have witnessed the previous session, the kind of discussions that have come up in the previous sessions. I welcome Professor Sergey and Professor Andrei, Professor Patrizia, and Professor Vasile. Very good friends of mine. Some of them we have been interacting since long. Good to see all of you together with us. Let me first introduce Professor Sergey Borisov from Russia, who is a professor and Director of Scientific and Educational Center, Ural State University, Head of the Department of Philosophy and Cultural Studies of the South Ural State Humanitarian Pedagogical University, President of Association of Philosophers Practitioners, Ratio, and also is the leader of Philosophical Cafe there. Since 2014, Sergey has been actively promoting philosophical practice and philosophical counseling among adults. He conducts courses as well as individual and group counseling sessions for those who would like to practice philosophy and philosophize, not in the school academic and the academic tradition, but on the worldview issues and problems that fill the world of everyday life. Active participant, he has been an active participant of 2 international conferences on philosophical practice. In fact, last 2 years he has hosted at Russia the International Conference on Philosophical Practice, which even I had the fortune of attending. With these few introductory with this introduction, I would invite Sergey to make his presentation. Friends, you have 20 minutes for presentation and 10 minutes for the discussion. First, we'll proceed with all the 3 presentations, all the 4 presentations, and then we'll have those 30 or 40 minutes towards the end for the discussion. Over to you, Sergey.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, the organizer of the wonderful conference, for giving me the opportunity to speak. Thank you, Balaganapathi, for presenting me. It's a great honor and responsibility for me. Can I show my presentation? Yes?
Yes, you can do that. You're the co-host, so you can do the presentation from your screen.
Okay. Let me explain right away that my philosophical practice is not intended for people with psychological problems, let alone mental illnesses. This is a practice for normal people who are not satisfied with their normality. To be normal, to be like everyone else, is very little in order to live a fulfilling life. Philosophical practice is a practice of contemplative exercises necessary for self-transformation. This is a source of philosophy. Everything else is just interesting information about philosophy, a game of the mind, no more. But as Lydia Amir says, philosophy should be taken seriously. I'm engaged in philosophical practice in small groups, face-to-face or online, both as a part of educational programs, the students and school children, and as a facilitator of philosophical cafe or the personal request of people. My method involves the synthesis of Socratic dialogue and contemplative philosophizing. For Socratic dialogue, I use the group work and elements of critical thinking. For contemplative philosophizing, I used practices of spiritual exercises, as well as phenomenological and existential practices for working with life meanings, and of course, hermeneutic practice for working these philosophical texts. I'm close to the methodology of deep philosophy developed on the practices by Reinhard. In this, I see a successful combination of phenomenological and existential practices. There's a contemplative attitude that is characteristic of the spirit of philosophy. This methodology does not consider philosophy in the applied sense for solving certain life problems, but as a way of life leading to a gradual self-transformation. First of all, I try to give some explanation of the main concept of deep philosophy, such as deep dimension, contemplation, etc., from the position of correlation of the ontic and ontological, the world in itself and the world for itself. For me, it's essential. In this case, I proceed from the philosophical position of Jean-Paul Sartre. In the in itself world, I am guided by external factors, circumstances that put me in a situation of choice. However, this choice does not concern me personally, but only my presence and non-presence under certain circumstances. But in the for itself world, I focus solely on presence, regardless of circumstances in which I am. That is a source for my consciousness. In this way, philosophy is projective activity, creating a project of oneself. A self-conscious person is always a borderline state between two realities. The reality of the actual is the reality of the possible. The bridge between these realities is philosophizing. Through self-awareness in the existence, ontic aspect, a person is given the opportunity to create or complete its project in being, ontological aspect. Philosophy is not fixed once and for all given, once developed and cognitable schemes. After all, these schemes are not an end in themselves. It is a means for something to happen, take place, and be accomplished as a new state of human consciousness. Thus, philosophical theory serves the practice of philosophical lifestyle. These practices always performed here and now in the situation of the realization of human being. It is always something new. In 2017, in Italy, a group of philosopher practitioners issued the Manifesto of Deep Philosophy. Deep philosophy now a broad association of philosopher practitioners. I am also a member of this movement. On this slide, you can see the website of our association. Philosophy, according to this manifesto, I only want to pay attention to 3 items. Philosophy, according to this manifesto, is first, contemplative, personal process leading to self-transformation, I have said. Philosophical contemplation, second, appears to deep structures of human existence, to the fundamental problems of human life. And third, joint contemplative communication of group members enhances this effect. At first glance, the phrase deep structures of human existence seem somewhat vague and frightening, puzzling. Why go deeper in the usual function of the mind and language, explanation, clarification, speaking, just the opposite, the removal of thought from the depth to the surface. In addition, the psychological connotation of the depth structures of human existence takes us into the field on research and interpretation of unconscious, which is a lot of psychologists and not a philosophy. However, the project of deep philosophy is precisely aimed at removing these familiar connotations. Contemplative philosophizing does not set itself as the task of describing certain psychological structures and explaining the mechanism of their work. Contemplative philosophizing sets itself a goal of penetrating beyond these structures, moving through these structures. The purpose of philosophizing is understanding, but not understanding the giveness of in itself hard patterns of human psyche, but understanding the enlightenment of being for itself. The elementary truth of philosophy is that person cannot completely consider himself as a given of the material world. Therefore, a person is not wholly and completely a given of psychic world, rigidly conditioned by any neurobiological structures or behavioral mechanisms. The intention of consciousness is directed into the future true and carry out besides of those structures and mechanisms. It is potentially incomplete project of being for itself. I am breaking this world in itself by the very fact of my consciousness, intention, reflection, transcendence, and the possibility of other being opens up for me the opportunity to be different from the world in itself, gaining being for itself. It is precisely this possible, this metaphoric phrase, the deep structures of human existence conveys, of being for itself, where a new vision of fundamental problems of human life is revealed to me. Philosophical contemplation is a special kind of intellectual work. It involves intelligence in all its diversity, and it's not limited only by the logical and analytical capabilities of the so-called critical thinking. Analytics is reduction, going deep into the object thinking experience. Philosophical contemplation is synthesis practice coming from the depth. It is clear that in order to go from the depths, one must first be there. But penetration into the depth of human existence is not performed by the method of analytical, in fact, surgical intervention, how the surgeon permeates the body, but the method of organic, non-violent penetration. As a rule, various forms of meditation are used for this. Exercises focusing attention to this depth. In principle, any deep immersion in thought, experience, text, culture, and natural object is meditation. And the exercise of achieving full focus on this is meditative practice. In this sense, all philosophy, starting for antiquity, also practices various forms of meditation. Philosophical contemplation is a practice in which our thinking comes in direct contact with this being. This is what distinguishes it from our usual thinking and understanding. Namely, the content of this thinking is not in itself a thought, and the forms and procedures of its expression The content of this thinking is the thinker himself, who is in direct relation, this being, witness to being, describing this experience of presence. Contemplative practice neutralizes the habitual rational and psychological mechanisms, goes beyond the boundaries of usual forms of thinking and reasoning. Contemplative thinking gives rise to thought before its objectification. Therefore, it's much brighter and richer. This feeling is familiar to all of us when we simply don't have the right words to describe the reality that it's open up to us. Although we distinctly feel the fullness of reality and all the preciousness and originality of the moment of presence experienced outside our usual mental framework. As a rule, our usual thinking models working in the autopilot mode interfere with the contemplative mode. To block these models, meditative practice are used that create the necessary contemplative attitude for philosophizing. Philosophical contemplation expands the possibilities of thinking, understanding. For example, as a work of art and deep music. But if a musical symphony can be perceived directly, aesthetically, then a philosophical symphony is given us indirectly through the text, and it can only be perceived eidetically. This requires understanding of the philosophical text. Understanding can be viewed from the ontic and ontological position too. Ontic understanding works in a system of rigid structures of interpretation defined by one and another philosophical paradigm. The criterion of understanding from the ontic point of view is the establishment of the correspondence of the philosophical text to a certain theoretical model that is received cultural and historical recognition in academic philosophy. The text itself may be subject to scientific criticism. There is a rule for ontic understanding that the interpreter must understand the text better and deeper than the author of the text. This expressed my fundamental distrust of the author of the text. However, in addition to existence of in itself, in factuality, the text can be realized for itself, from me. It is possibility. Understanding from ontological position involves an interpretation coming from philosophical text, which can be realized by resonating these thoughts and ideas generated by this text and coming from our inner depth. The philosophical text becomes for me a tool for interpreting my own thoughts. I interpret what I managed to catch here, coming into resonance with the text. Resonance with the text is possible if there is no divide between me and the text, if I find my presence in the text. This is the essence of understanding in ontological sense. I understand myself as a text, and the text is understood by me in my interpretation of this unique experience of understanding. For ontological understanding, the rule is that the interpreter must understand the text on the basis of full confidence in the author, without taking a detached position, even he doesn't share their thoughts and ideas of the author. And the last, but not least, a position in deep philosophy and in me, one should distinguish between philosophical ideas and philosophical theories. Theories has never had a direct connection with reality because they give a systematically and structurally captured model of reality, its idealization. Unlike philosophical theories, philosophical ideas are distinct in clear voices of reality that can be perceived, thought, and understood. A theory can communicate something, but it cannot call for something, call and encourage the idea. The theory can explain, justify, prove something, but it cannot transform, inspire, induce someone to act. It makes an idea. The theory is dead because it gives a complete and detached description of the world in itself. The idea is alive because it serves the subject to realize the world for the possible, of the possible, the world for itself. It's my main thoughts, main theses. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Sergey, for this interesting presentation. And I'm sure there are many thoughts that might have come to our audience to probe further. Probably we'll allow them towards the end of all the presentations so that we can have an engaging session at the end. Now I invite Dr. Patrizia Salvaterra, sorry, an independent scholar from University of Milan, University of Verona as well. She is from Italy. Patrizia is an APA certified philosophical counselor based in Verona, northeastern Italy. She graduated with honors in philosophy from State University of Milan, where she served as a research fellow and lecturer for some years, focusing on phenomenology, aesthetics, ethics, and philosophy of history. She wrote and published mainly on Hegel, Husserl, and Lyotard and postmodernism. In the last few years, she has been collaborating with the University of Verona as a member of the teaching staff. Patrizia is also a scientific journalist and an expert on communication matters, merging philosophical knowledge and practice expertise in her work as a counselor, trainer, and consultant. I invite Patrizia to make a presentation. Patrizia, over to you.
Okay. Hi to everybody. Yeah, I have to invite Vikas to open my presentation. Anyway, thanks for being here. Hi to everybody. I'm delighted to be with you. And once again, I wish to thank Professor Bala and Dr. Vikas and all the colleagues and young collaborators, Madulika, for this huge, incredible job you have done organizing this international conference. Many speakers has underlined the value of this conference as an historic event. And I think that it is actually, because it's the first ever event in India, and so many speakers and so many experts from all over the world. It's a huge, fantastically organized convention. So I'm proud to be here and I'm honored. Yes, I'm doing this to control my slides. My presentation is going to be a bit long, so I have in some part to rush. But of course, I invite all the participants to write to me. Of course, the presentation itself and the paper on which it's based, it's available to everybody, and I'm available to answer any kind of questions, even after the conference in itself, of course. I can't see myself, yes, now maybe I can, yes. No, I see Bala, but anyway, it doesn't matter. I don't have to see myself. I go on. Okay. Okay, yes, you have already presented me. I've written more than 80 articles on the matter I'm going to present to you. So it's going on. Okay. This is the city where I live. I invite you to visit it. It's Verona. Professor Oscar Brenifier named Juliet and Romeo as a symbol of tragic love between individuals. And this is the city where I live. So please come to visit us. It's a beautiful city. And okay, the goals, oh my gosh, too fast. Okay, the goals of my presentation: to share my practical experience. Actually, I haven't been a philosophical counselor for 10 years, met kind of 70, 80 people in these years. And so I think that I can be of a kind usefulness for you. My final goal is to write. I'm writing at the moment a sort of guideline for philosophical counseling as a best practice. And I'm borrowing some elements, few methodological criteria and some lexicon, some words from the scientific medical field. I'm writing a lot on that matter because of my journalism and also my philosophical journalism. And so concepts that are seen as a sort of difficult word like recommendation and grading and evidence or evidence-based and validity, consensus, controversies, critical issues or pitfalls, tips and tricks can be quite handy for the development of my project. Okay. Oh, sorry. Sorry. The guideline. I think to think about a guideline, especially after 2 days of conference, when it clearly emerged that it can exist a unique method for philosophy, because of course we have all of us belong to different kind of philosophical traditions, and we are geographically, historically, and existentially based in our different lives and dimensions. So it can be a challenge and a paradox, because no ultimate sentence of what defines the philosophical practice can never be written. And in my practice, and as a scholar, as a researcher, I'm still thinking that a question like what is philosophical counseling is in a sort of inappropriate, but how to do it? Because the main issue, the main scope of this international conference has been to transfer the tools of practice to our colleagues and to share among us our different experience in order to be more effective in our daily life practice. And another objection which drove me to the project of preparing a guideline is that philosophical counselors generally refuse to adhere to standards that may prove the validity of their work and ground its validity. So I think that this is another good point in favor of a guideline. The presentation topics. The first part of my presentation, which I hope to do it in a short way, it's the train of thought, has Whitehead nominated, which in with I find my travel friends for extending the dialogue with my clients and some frequently asked questions. So the question that the client generally put on the table when they decide to meet a counselor, to meet me on my experience, and a couple of practical cases. A good and a bad one, and I will explain you why I consider the second one a bad one, not in itself, but for the result that came out. Philosophy, oops, sorry, it's too fast. I'm working on it. Philosophy begins with a question, and the question often begins with a why. And of course, when human beings started questioning about the meaning of their condition, that can be recognized as a start of philosophy. A client who comes to us with such question has already started his pathway in discovering his or her inner philosopher. And our role is that one of a facilitator. This is the role that I prefer. Personally, I think we are not psychotherapists, we are not psychologists, we are philosophers. And the role of a philosopher as a counselor is that one to facilitate this travel, this process, this pathway that the client has already started because he or she has decided to come to us. So he's already on the train. She just needs to share with us our travel friends. And we can use all the tools we have, reading and speaking and dialoguing, but he has already come up on the train. Many questions, all stemming from the human need to understand and know, and consequently to decide. And this is really the process: knowledge and understanding and deciding. They may be the same, but they're all rooted, as I was telling before, on the culture, history, geography, language, and the time we are living. Of course, philosophy doesn't look for clear answers, aim to a deeper understanding, and sometimes to a broader knowledge. And what we can share with them, yesterday, Professor Rostoy was underlining that. We can share experience with them, and we can instill in the person who comes maybe unhappy or worried or simply depressed, the joy of living and experience the joy and the beauty of nature, which is, this is a common worry that sometimes students ask to me. Why should we, as philosophical counselor, be worried not to have the right answers for our clients if we share some meaningful question? The problem is not the answer, because the answer can be many. But of course, the questions are fundamental. So why do we live and why do we die? And this is, of course, the sphere of existence and experience of life and death and time. And my favorite authors are Aristotle and Bertrand Russell and Lumarinov. So really, I pass from the ancient philosophy to the modern one. Bertrand Russell with a text fantastic on happiness, for example, it's really helpful. His vision of the zest of life and the interest in things in people that we can share with our client. And Lumarinov with big questions or the middle way can be really helpful. And of course, philosophy on today, when you root philosophy on today issues, you face crucial decisions that today individual or family may face, like becoming parents after a risky illness. It's cancer of a mother who she has overcome. But of course, this condition, this dramatic experience can make some fundamental question arise in the person. Or to become parents using frozen embryos, like the first case I'm going to comment with you. What is good and what is evil? Why do we need and how to live in a virtuous way? Why do we need to live in a societal form? Are questions relating to moral philosophy, ethics, and politics. They may refer to the concept of free will, of the relationship with other people. A professor during this day, Anthony Savory-Ray, he was mentioning the value of our role as philosopher to interpret the world in order to change the world, but to arrive to that point, we have to love the world. So this was fantastic. We need each other and we have to be in a sort of loving relationship. Some of my pivotal sources are Plato and Seneca and Kant and Nietzsche and Jürgen Habermas on the communicative behavior. He's fundamental to understand the value of relationship, the I being always related with another. And that's fundamental. Today issues, for example, is getting vaccinated a moral imperative? I have two clients who are no vax. And of course, we discuss a lot about if this is a policy-related health policy or an economical decision, or must be a decision based on a free will of the person, or the collective interest in a way is more important. Why do we need to prove our opinions with facts and observation? This is very important for me. It comes from the project of the Guideline. And it's a big question. Philosophy can change the world. Galilei, he changed the world actually with his vision, with the sun in the center of the universe and the moon traveling around the earth. He went in prison, of course. Fortunately, he didn't die like Socrates did, but he was a man who proved the truth in the idea of Nicolaus Copernicus 100 years before, that he has imagined a different kind of world, observing nature. Of course, Galileo had a tool, and we need tools to make to prove our thought and our conviction. Sometimes technology can help us, like in this moment we are all connected with the internet, and this is a technological tool, and we are using in our favor in order to broaden and to transfer our thought. So this is epistemology and philosophy of science can be very useful to face issues like complexity of the decisions, role of technology, the power of data, who we can trust, which kind of information we can trust. Too many information means no information. And then the last, and then I pass to my cases, to my practical cases. Why do we need to create and enjoy art? And art is a very important experience that we can share with our client in any moment, because together with the reading of philosophical text, which is fundamental, those philosophers who we prefer and we find more comfort with to share, we can also share artistic experience, aesthetic, to appreciate the aesthetic of the beauty of the nature, invite our clients to take a walk and to go out and then into the wood, and or go into a cinema or go into a theater, trying to instill the love for art, because aesthetic experience is something which is helpful for a person who has momentarily lost his zest for life. And today issue the value of a work of art, for example, who evaluate the work of art, how much is important in terms of experience, of also economic of the object of art, and the role of the body. That's another enormous, huge philosophical topic in all the phenomenology, contemporary Merleau-Ponty, the role of body, of flesh, of being together, physically together. It's an enormous topic now that we are all related more virtually than physically. And then the problem of language. Different speakers before me has touched this fundamental topic. Why do we need to define things and to be precise in the word we use? For example, it was interesting before me, Boris, he used the word, that was very interesting for me. He used the idea, the concept of idea as a very positive one, if I've correctly understood, where for Ortega, the Spanish philosopher that yesterday, one speaker quoted yesterday, Ortega said that we have ideas, but we are our beliefs. So he put the idea in something which we can have in itself, but not for ourselves. So it's very interesting how words count, but change according to what we are and how we use them. And of course, Carnap and Greimas are two of my favorite philosophers in this field. The first case, Anna came to me some time ago. We met for 8 times, which for me it's quite a big number of sessions. 42 years old, she is a manager, a director in a chemical company, married with Piero, and they have a daughter, Federica. Now she's 15 years old, but she was adopted when she was 3. In the last 2 years, Anna has desired to become mother again. She would like to resort to in vitro fertilization with embryo transfer and artificial insemination because they are an infertile couple. Her husband, Piero, is doubtful. He is a man of faith and has a sort of moral and ethical resistance against it. He thinks that it's against nature and it's ontologically against the natural conjugal act. And this could, he thinks that an ethical decision, more ethical and more morally and socially acceptable, is to adopt another child. And of course, this position of the husband has created a conflict between them, and she's suffering for this because this conflict has spoiled the relationship in the daily life, in their dialogue, and even in the physical relationship, which has been affected by this conflict. And Federica, of course, she is in her adolescent period, so she tends to isolate from them and to escape from them. But of course, this conflictual couple has created a further problem for her. And moreover, she has showed some rare outbursts of rage, and Anna is worried about these behaviors. So she looked for advices from relatives, colleagues, friends, but she came to me a bit disoriented and confused. And which we tried to look for the different position of the member of which I tried to do it, at least, Anna and Piero and Federica, all of them with their question about the matter and their preferences. So, question arising from her regarding the concept of time. Yeah, okay, thanks. Thank you. So I had to rush, unfortunately, it's too long. Yes, so the question was, is she desiring to become parents because of the time passing? So the fear of becoming old, and then she has recently lost her father. So the loss of her beloved father make her think of what it matters and what it does not in life. And giving birth is a strong experience in the individual lives, of course. And so we start reading Seneca, the Brevitate Vita. I use quite often Seneca. In this case, I use the Brevitate Vita, the Ira, because of the outburst of rage of Federica. We commented Zarathustra, the Staspos Zarathustra, a book for everyone of the body by Nietzsche. And when he says everything about a woman is a riddle and everything about a woman is a single solution, that is pregnancy, of course we should comment this sentence because it's of course is contexted in Nietzsche thoughts. But in this way, I use it as these words have a positive hope in what a new life means for us. And then Pietro position, of course, we try to find different sources to open and to broaden his position, finding a reason in what he thinks. And we found it in Aristotle first and in Thomas Aquinas. Aquinas, he is almost orthodox in Catholicism, and he based his refusal of any unnatural choice, like for him is artificial insemination, following the Catholic congregation of the doctrine of faith. But of course, we try to understand that Aquinas is also thinks that natural goes towards reason, and reason is based in nature, and it goes towards good. So the work of man is achieved only in accordance with practical wisdom, as for us. Oops, sorry. Yes. Okay. Sorry. Yes. So virtues goes naturally towards good, and virtues is enfleshed into a human being which is made of nature and reason together. So Anna was probably moved by both a natural desire to bear her own genetic child, by a rational examination of the situation of her family, with her role in the camp, but also she connected to the fear that he was taking off time from her existence and from the family. But the first result, the first outcome in our dialogue regarding her position was that she accepted that nothing was wrong in her desire. She had the right to desire to become mother. So she decided to share this reflection with her husband as a proof of understanding of his doubts. She tried to make him see both and the good and moral aspects and the rational ones behind all the scientific research that developed. And so they were not necessarily in contrast with his religious beliefs, because nature is not opposite to reason. So technology and science can accomplish nature, not being against it. she trusted she tried to transmit this feeling to and the thoughts to the husband. And then she, of course, more issues were there was the issue of fear. Of course, he was fearing to lose his wife, of course, because the medical process can go wrong. And I think that I'm out of my time. And so can I go on, or I have to interrupt here and then we can just discuss the first case?
You can take 1 more minute to conclude, so that
how many minutes?
1 minute or 2 minutes?
Okay. So, well, you can read the cases, because of course I can rush on because we examined the Federica position, and we decided that in the family, Anna could increase the oral communication with Federica, because, of course, being an adolescent, young people prefer to text instead of talking directly. So she never find the time to speak to her mother, and she preferred to text on smartphone instead of facing live conversation. And we all know what Socrates thinks about written conversations, like in a way losing the physical presence of being together, to transfer apart from words and advices, and to share doubts and fears. Also being physically present, demonstrating and showing care and attention to the other person count, especially when there is a conflict to be solved. And of course, there are the quotation from the text. Oops. So Federica, then we examine Federica outbursts of rage, and Hannah lacks of desire for intimacy. We examine the word eros and love, and it was very interesting to understand the deep meaning of the word love. And she examined together the dimension of their marriage. So I have to conclude, of course. So I just rush. The second case is very interesting, because in the second case, a young boy who loves art decides not to follow his muse because the family doesn't allow him. So I just go to the last slide, and then I close my presentation. Sergio, this is a young boy, 21 old, studying law, not interested in what he's studying. He would like to become an artist. And but unfortunately, during our encounters, he didn't stick to his personal passions, because, and that's why I consider this is a bad case. Sergio could not follow the passion for art and his competence. He didn't feel free to cultivate his interest for art. During the third and last session, he told me that his parents considered his desire of studying art as a foolish project. Art was seen by his family, both the parents are lawyers, as a professional choice of a loser. But he had succeeded in talking to them openly, and considered this fact an upgrade in their relationship. He was feeling better, and that was our last encounter. So, conclusions. Both the cases may contribute to our better understanding and of the complexity of the decision processes. In the first case, highlights the value of each individual position, Federica, Piero, and Anna, trying to facilitate the reaching of a wise agreement with this family, whose members are still fond of each other and share a common project. While the last case reminds us that parents can be deluded in what they wish for their children, and their project may differ from each other. Even Lucilius' parents, in the letter to Lucilius by Seneca, they would have wanted worldly success for him, the continuation of the family property and fortune, and his contribution to fatherland. Seneca doesn't condemn them, who are probably moved by parental love, but tell us that life is short and only truly goods are eternal. He encouraged Lucilius to believe in himself, indulge his vocation for poetry, and use his own reason. So this is just our hope as philosophical counselors, helping people to see more clearly what really matters for them. and exploration, which is most of the time leads to a better quality of life. Thank you. And you have the, yes, you have the references here. Yes, and all the sources are based, and so please.
Yeah,
yes.
Great. Thank you so much, Patrizia, for that very
yes.
interesting presentation. I'm sorry I had to intervene.
Yes, sorry, it was
which
longer.
I don't want to do.
2 cases, if you analyze 2 cases in a deep way, with the different issues that came out, the different sources and the text we based our practice, you can't compress them to so few minutes. So I would have needed a longer time, but I hope to be in some way an example of how to face counseling, and then of course so the participant can read the text and the slides, so they can go deep and ask me what they are interested in. So thanks for listening to me.
Yeah, those were very interesting case studies that you have presented. In fact, please make them available to us so that we can make them further available to the participants.
Yes, of course. Thank you.
Let me proceed to the next speaker of today's session, Dr. Vasile, who is from Romania. Dr. Vasile has PhD and doctoral studies in philosophy, but basically his bachelor's degree is in economics and law. So probably the diversity of his interests is something that is very interesting to us, and which might have made him do well in philosophical counseling as well. His research and academic affiliation is at the Faculty of Political Science, Philosophy and Sciences of Communication at West University of Timisoara. And he is also the director of Research Department for Philosophy at Institute for Social and Political Research. And he is presently editor-in-chief at IRCEP Journal. And his professional affiliation is the president of the Romanian Association of Philosophical Counselling and Ethics, and he is a practitioner certified by APA. In fact, I should mention this, that Professor Vasile, under his presidency, the Romanian Association of Philosophical Counselling is the one which is hosting the upcoming Indian International Conference of Philosophical Practice in the coming years. His research interest is oriented for interdisciplinary links between philosophical practice and ethics, applied in many areas such as economics, community, social responsibility and environment, personal development, bioethics, education, organizational consultancy and leadership, democracy and society, group facilitation and communication, alternative conflict resolution, philosophy for society. So he has been practicing philosophical counseling along with being a part of the academia as well. It's wonderful to have Dr. Vasile with us. I welcome Dr. Vasile for his presentation.
Thank you, Professor. Hello, colleagues. Please let me know if my presentation is on screen.
Yes, it is on screen. Please.
Okay, excellent. I intend to speak today about the Romanian route to the philosophical counseling from practice to profession. And some words about me. As you say, the Professor Bala say about me, I represent here the Romanian Association. We have this association from 5 years ago, and I am affiliated as a lecturer on West University of Timisoara. I started my curiosity with my PhD thesis. The title is Philosophical Counselling from Practice to Profession. And the thesis was published in 2018 in Bucharest. About my research, including special chapters about the recognizing the new profession of philosophical counseling in my country. My research, my work studies what were the first preoccupation, the philosophical practice, starting with the position expressed by important philosophers and practitioners in the world, continuing with the contemporary premises and philosophical practice in Romania. About the first premises in the appearance of philosophical practice in Romania, first step is philosopher Emil Cioran is one of the great Romanian philosophers established in the Paris in 1941, and he speaks of philosophy in his posthum journal as he say, only words and words, that is the philosophy. The book was published posthum in 2011 in Romania. This is an original point of view of how he saw the role of philosophy in the people's lives. If you know, Romanian was in the after Second World War, was under communist regime, and the philosophy was considered to be dangerous for a system. A single doctrine about the world and life. The only discipline with a philosophical character that were in the educational curriculum at the time were logic, the history of philosophy, and dialectical and history materialism. This words was a member of the Romanian Academy and philosopher and named Mircea Flonta. Now going forward, I want to speak some words about another Romanian philosopher, Constantin Noica is my favorite Romanian philosopher, and he in 1944 has published the Philosophical Journal, a short book where he speaks to those who want to discover the philosophy. He say, if you have a little madness and a mountain of measure, you will meet philosophy once. In that time, the Romanian philosophy has a clear tendency towards an encyclopedia way of presenting the philosophy concept, having some amateurism. In terms of another cited is in terms of philosophy, we must launch and admit that is now nothing. Continue about this philosopher, Romanian philosopher. He published in 1978 a small philosophical treatise about some disease of the human spirit, called it the Romanian spirit of the balance of the time, 6 diseases of the contemporary spirit. This is the next is written in Romanian version, but this work is included in the program of master's degree in philosophical counseling conducted in University of Rome by Professor Adriano Fadris. Now I continue my trip and starting to other Romanian philosophers and practitioners. One was Professor Valentin Mureșanu. He say, neither philosophical consulting nor ethics management is not philosophy or moral philosophy, but they are philosophical application. They are other professions. And the second professor in philosophy is Cristian Iftode. He say it's necessary philosopher to other consulting and individual and group assistance. And now I finish with Professor Staicu. He's professor in philosophy in Bucharest, and he is the first Romanian philosopher who opens in 2009 a philosophical practice office in Bucharest. Now I will continue with another information. In 2015, the first course in Romanian appeared, conducted by Professor Florin Robons in West University in Timisoara, and he's starting the first master course in Romania. The title is Philosophical Counselling and Consultancies. This program is in English, is accessible to the both graduates of philosophy and to the other specialization. This program initially has a collaboration with other university and institution in Europe. Someone was University of Venice and l'Institut de Pratique Philosophique from France. And recent researches of the professionalization, I have identified some dilemmas faced by the practitioners in the philosophical consulting. One is some are the forced philosophers who can become the practitioners, and other for the training of specialists in the philosophical consulting. Another deep dilemma was confrontation is between the academic philosophy with the philosophy put in practice. And the dilemma of practicing philosophy is a practice reservation of only for the philosopher, or waiter if can regulate a profession that allows access to this training of two other specialists coming from different fields of training who can specialize in the philosophical concept. From this research of the interdisciplinary links manifested by philosophical consulting, we can find the other discipline have taken over and applied many times the forms of philosophical practice without the philosophical agreement. And I have in my research shown solution, assumption the role of the mediator between this position of the practitioners to work for mediation of the found the position in the sense of the middle acceptance and renouncing to the dispute. I propose even the achievement of the so-called the mutual agreement, especially between academic philosophy and philosophical consultings. I have studied the mediation model as a profession recognized and regulated in Romania. We have from 2006 a special law, and I have identified many points of convergence of this for the new philosophical practice. Some confirmation I found in my research, one is from Spanish, Professor Rastroyo, who make a statement of these regards points. He say applied philosophy dissolve and only occasionally resolve conflict. Mediation deals and exclusively with solving things. If mediation is about resolving conflict or dispute between persons, the philosophical counseling can be regarded as a mediation of the soul, which is performed by a specialist of philosophy practitioners. And now I will present you some elements characteristic of between mediation and philosophical counseling. This is some point. From these dates presented in the table, we can observe the major similarity that are the characteristic of the two analyzation profession. The regulation of the profession of mediator can be here in Romania a good model to our process to recognize and regulation a new profession, philosophical counseling inside the philosophical occupation. For access in the new profession, we have the graduates in philosophy with bachelor degree, and we construct now the other programs with post-university level for other graduates from non-philosophical graduates. And we intend to attract the person with PhD in philosophy. They can support the new profession, and they are invited to participate to our project. I show you now. This is the scheme from acceding in the new profession in Romanian. Starting with graduates in philosophy or in other fields, they can accede to the post-university course or master program. And PhD in philosophy can support our association to have many practitioners in the philosophical counseling practice area. We're working now for recognizing the new profession. We intend to prepare now the national standard of the training programs. This work is in progress, and I intend to propose to our Romanian parliament a project of law, a special law to protect the new profession in philosophical counseling in Romanian. And our association can be a national profession organization in the futures. Now we have, in recapitulation, we have the master program from 2015. We have a Romanian association. We have now a post-university study program, and I hope to start in this year in October. And we have the registration of the new occupation. The philosophical counselor is a distinct occupation in Romania. The philosophical counseling can be can be a special profession that deserves to be recognized. Last month, Romanian institution in our country have confirmed our application. The philosophical counseling will be registered in the National Register of the Occupation as a new occupation which can be practiced here in Romania. But I think the final test will be validated in the future practice by successful applying into the people's lives and the community. About this topic, I wrote a short article, was published in Philosophical Practice 2 years ago. We can find this integral article. And thinking it for the futures, I think our national direction can be for opening the other specialization, which can be training in the new specialization in the field of the philosophical consulting. We need the lobby support for our initiative in Parliament for regulating the new profession, and we intend to participate in many philosophical consulting in international events of the practitioners. And finally, I want to make an invitation to all of the participants, all of you, for the next ICPP in 2023 will be hosted by our association with West University Timisoara in Romania. And the location will be the Timisoara city in June 2023. This is the website for these events in 2023. And the second invitation is if you want to publish the papers we have a new scientific journals. The title is Interdisciplinary Research in Counseling, Ethics, and Philosophy. This is our website, and we can take a look for. We have 3 issues in each year. The journal is without access, free charge, and already indexed in SEOL database. And now I say thank you to all for my attention, and this is my email to participate to our next events or for our interdisciplinary journal. Thank you all for attention.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Vasile, for that interesting presentation of Romanian experience of dealing with philosophical counseling and bringing it from practice to profession. Now, that's what all of us are trying to work hard for, and also struggling to do. I don't know how many countries have accepted philosophical counseling as legally as a profession, but you seem to have done a wonderful job, and you're reaching out to the legislative councils as well now for this purpose. That's great. Thank you so much for that presentation. It is very encouraging for us as well, that and also it tells us what are the steps that we have to take further to establish philosophical counseling as a profession in India. So with that, let me proceed to the next speaker that we have, a very good friend of mine, Andre. Andre is a philosopher, a philosophical counselor, and a professor from Brazil. For 5 years, Andre has been an associate tutor in the philosophy department at the University of Sussex, UK. He has also previously worked at the United Nations as a consultant and as a researcher in international business. Andre has a MA in philosophy and a PhD in philosophy, both from the University of Sussex. He is the author of the book, Isn't Particularism the Ethics of Human Dignity? Otherwise, we have been regularly corresponding last year on philosophical counseling. We together we had almost at least 20 sessions, one-to-one sessions on philosophical counseling. So nice to see you, Dr. Andre here. Floor is yours, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Bala. I will try to share my presentation as well. Can you see it properly?
Yes, yes, we can.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so first of all, I just would like to thank you very, very much, Professor Bala. I think this have been, it is being, but it has been in these last few days, a truly wonderful conference. I think everything that you do seems to be done with so much care and thought, and we can clearly see that in the conference. So interesting, so helpful, and such an enriching experience. It's a great honor to be invited to be a part of this conference, and I have, I think, personal joy for being in this specific panel that you have chosen for me. I also would like to thank very much Dr. because I can only imagine how much energy, how much time, how much effort you have put into this, Dr. because for the benefit of us all. And as I mentioned, it's truly an honor because Sergey, I think I will never forget what you and your colleagues, your whole team have done in Russia for the International Conference on Philosophical Practice, not only once, but 2 years in a row. And that was really, really enriching, a wonderful experience. Professor Vasile has taken the adventure of organizing the next one, as Professor Bala mentioned, and I'm very much looking forward for that. That's great for our community, and it's great to see my colleague from APA, Dr. Patrizia, here as well with us. Today, I will be speaking about some core issues in the philosophical counseling of business executives. Just as a background information, I do work in a business school, so it's only natural for me that this scope of work and especially research into business executives, not only that's my daily public when I teach philosophy and all of that, but I'm also very much exposed to the reality of business executives. And it's a little bit from that insight of such exposition that I develop these thoughts here. So the question that I'm really focusing on in the paper is, what are, from a philosophical perspective, some of the core issues which assail and impoverish the lives of business executives? for which philosophical counselors can, I think, be very helpful, very supportive, very beneficial. And from the outset, I already mentioned, I already reviewed my view that these core problems are the lack of sufficient autonomy, the lack of sufficient responsibility, and the lack of sufficient integrity, which I will explain during the presentation in some detail, at least what I mean by those concepts and their lack. And I should also say that I decided to focus on these three problems of autonomy, responsibility, and integrity, but there are also other generalizable and very important fundamental problems that business executives face, which we as philosophical counselors can support them with. So one of those would be the lack of sufficient authenticity, I believe, and another would be a clear understanding of the value of work in their lives, the value of work in the life of any human being. But I won't be, due to time constraints, focusing on these other issues. I will focus on these three that I mentioned here. And I know that when I'm talking about these deep human needs, such as the need for autonomy, the need for responsibility, and the need for integrity, that I'm talking about something that do apply to every person, to any person, irrespective of their context. So even if they are not business executives, which is the scope of my paper here, my research in this case. But the thing is, there are certain specificities of business contexts which make these otherwise common problems play out in a particular and peculiar way in those contexts. And that's why I believe it's useful to do some research specifically turned to that public, to that scope in terms of public. So I recognize, I acknowledge that when a seeker approaches us, any one of us, for philosophical counseling, they will have their specific issues in mind. And I'm referring to three core, which I'm calling core problems here, which are, again, autonomy, responsibility, and integrity. And at face value, the problem, the issue that our seeker, which is seeking our support, comes with and presents to us may, at least on the face of it, not be related to those core issues that I'm talking about here, even if they are a business executive. They happen to be, as Patrizia, if I understood properly in one of the cases that she mentioned, the person was a business executive. So they just happen to be a business executive. But the thing is, even so, we can make a distinction between, I think, what a person needs and what a person believes they need. And this distinction may be relevant here because maybe they approach us with a certain problem on the face of it, but that problem may be connected with deeper underlying problems. And when I mention these three issues of autonomy, integrity, and responsibility as core problems, in one sense, I mean that they are the kind of problems that are at that underlying level. They will be at the background of the seeker that comes to you for philosophical counseling, if they are business executive. I also acknowledge that even though I'm making a generalization about these problems, someone that comes to us for philosophical counseling will be situated in a particular context. They will have a unique nature and character, and they will have singular life experiences in terms of the baggage from the past that they bring to the experiences that they are having in the present, and that at least to some degree influence those experiences in the present. But even though I acknowledge that, those 2 points, I still want to put forward the claim that there are systemic problems in business contexts which are related to deep human needs, those human needs that I have been referring to, the need for proper or sufficient autonomy, integrity, and responsibility. And I take that to be quite a strong claim, actually, because when I'm talking about systemic problems here, I'm talking about problems that apply across the board. To be very precise about it, I think this applies to an executive of any large company and any medium company and any small company that can be located at the top cohort of small companies. Perhaps it will not apply to a local shop in which we have 3 to 5 people working on them, but for larger organizations, I'm suggesting that these problems apply across the board, which again, I am aware is a very strong claim to be made, and I still insist on making it. But what I mean by that is not necessarily that every single executive that may come to you for philosophical company, for philosophical practice, counseling sessions will necessarily have those issues as problems, because some people may just have dealt with those kinds of issues sufficiently or to a sufficient degree that makes them unproblematic for that specific person. But even in those cases, I want to suggest that they still need to face those issues on a daily basis, in the sense that there will be an inevitable tension about those things that they will have to handle on a daily basis. That tension can be seen, for example, in the very and simple fact that in general, business organizations are organized in hierarchical modes. And when we are talking about the need for autonomy, that in itself presents a tension that kind of remains unresolved, really. But it's still possible to support the person in dealing with such tension, with such pressure, in a healthy way, in a way that is not detrimental to them. So just to be clear, when I'm talking about core issues that affect negatively business executives, I mean core issues in these 2 senses, that they are related to deep human needs, needs that every human being have, existential needs, and they refer to systemic problems, which again, I mean by that these are problems that apply really across the board. There are a long conceptual elaboration to be made about these problems and these points. But that's not the route that I'm taking here in this presentation today. Instead, I think it will be just more helpful for everybody if I try to illustrate how those problems play out in real case studies. So I will mention here a couple of case studies in which I think those problems are present, and I will give a sense to you of how those problems are present in those cases, right? So these, I call it the abusive boss case. So this is an executive who came for me for support through philosophical counseling. This is a lady that had as her boss another lady, and really she came in a state of overwhelming degree of anxiety. She was feeling very oppressed, and for the first part of the first session that we had together, her hands were shaking. She was crying compulsively and could barely talk. She took a while just to calm down and be able to explain what situation she was facing. And by the description that she gave of that situation, we can say that really she was being abused and oppressed. So to a very basic level. So there were cases that she shared with me in which so she had projects that she would initiate. So those projects would be her own initiative. She would be very, very excited about them and work really hard in those projects. And when the project was ready to be launched, and then she would kind of reap the fruits of a long process of work and dedication that she did for those projects. In a sense, her boss would steal the project from her, give it to another person to actually implement, and give the credit to this other person as well. Another kind of instance of something that she shared with me is there were more than one situations in which there would be a meeting, like a team meeting in which the boss would be present, but also other colleagues of her. And right before the meeting, the boss would call her separately and say, "You are forbidden to speak during this meeting at all. You can just you are not allowed to open your mouth during this meeting." And she would do that precisely when the seeker of mine would actually have something of interest to say. So there were these different kinds of situations, and we can just see how those problems that I have been talking about apply here. So there is an obvious breach of autonomy here, and I think that I don't need to talk much about that, but it's really interesting, I think, and I use this example in order to give a sense of how this is a more general problem. There is a really serious problem about the understanding, I would say, of the attribution or the proper responsibility, the proper attribution of responsibility in business contexts. And the issue that is behind that is to do with the connection between choice and responsibility. For many of those business executives, it's not clear how to attribute responsibility because they don't explicitly understand the connection between choice and responsibility, in the sense that once you have a choice, you are responsible for the choices that you are making and for the consequences of that choice. So she wouldn't, in this specific case, understand the fact that even if the boss forbids her, tells her that she is not allowed to speak during the meeting, she actually still have a choice to make there of either speaking or not. Of course, in either case, that would be consequences, but she still had a choice. And she couldn't see, she didn't realize that she actually had a choice in terms of that. And I explain a little bit more about that in the next case. But we can just see how that will cause problems of integrity. For example, due to lack of proper self-respect, right? What was really interesting in this case, and I mentioned this because this makes it clear how much a philosophical counselor would be an appropriate kind of support and professional to help her clarify the issue and handle the issue properly. So she actually had a problem within her conception of ethics, I would say, which again is a generalizable, it's a very common problem in business context. So for her, due to hierarchy, her duties were to, in some important sense, obey her superior. She was ethically obliged to do so. So when she first came to me, even though she was in a lot of distress, she was actually worried that she was doing something wrong, morally speaking, because she was not obeying her boss properly. So we had a long journey discussing and allowing her to understand better her understanding of ethics, where it came from, and how things like self-respect needed also to be taken into account while she was making the calculations of how to act in each given situation. And I don't have a lot of time, but I just wanted to briefly note that I'm just talking about these issues superficially here. But if we take, for instance, philosophical understanding of autonomy and take into account autonomy in the internal level, for example, in a Kantian sense, we can see that this problem becomes really, really serious, because there will be systemic structures in place, for example, related to incentive structures that will set goals for the organization, for the business as a whole, and those goals will be reflected in each individual's specific goals. And there's something that lacks humanity in that. It's a systemic thing, you know, it's kind of IT that you just have to follow the rules, otherwise you are kind of swimming against the current of the goal of the organization as a whole. And sometimes following the goal of the organization as a whole would lead you to do things that you simply disagree with from an ethical point of view. Briefly, I will go into this second case study, which I call the I had no choice case, because this was a group work. There were 5 people in total. We had 5 sessions of this same group. So this kind of group identity built up, which was really interesting because people became much more comfortable to share the deeper things that they actually experienced over the sessions in this case. And this happened with one of the participants, which had a really interesting story. In 1-2 minutes, I will conclude. She used to be a vice president in a large Brazilian company for many years. She was very uncomfortable in that position. Over time, she decided to change careers completely. So she quitted her job, which in some sense was a successful one, a successful career in the sense that she worked really hard to get to that position, but she wasn't happy in that work. So she changed and became the Secretary General of an ONG in Brazil that supports poor children that have been sexually abused, which is a beautiful thing to do. She was really proud of that. But over our discussion, she realized that what she was really uncomfortable with as a business executive was with making choices on a daily basis that she disagreed with, and she didn't realize that actually she was the one making those choices. She was in a kind of auto mode, just following the economic goals, let's say, of the corporation, which led her in the position of a vice president then to take some rough decisions. And she didn't digest those decisions very well. Over time, that became toxic. She had to quit the job. During the work that we did, she understood that the problem was not actually the job. She actually enjoyed the job. The problem was those decisions that she was making that she thought she didn't have an alternative choice to make in those situations. And ironically, by the end of our work, she was admitting to herself that actually she wasn't that happy in the ONG as well, because there was a whole dimension of being on a daily basis exposed with so much suffering from these children that she didn't handle that really well. It wasn't actually a very appropriate position to her. But I mentioned this case because actually she was shocked when she realized during one of our sessions that actually she had a choice in many situations over the years that she assumed she didn't have a choice. And this is to do with responsibility for our choices and a misunderstanding in terms of that. So just briefly to mention that we as philosophical counselors can help a lot, actually, these business executives, and they appreciate their help. If not with anything else, it's already very helpful to support them in dealing with these issues consciously, like with this lady, helping her to see that actually she has a choice to be made in the decisions that she is making. So if by no other means, already helping them to deal consciously with those issues is already a meaningful contribution and benefit to their lives. So I will stop here and thank you very much for the time and the opportunity to share these ideas with you here today.
That's great. Thank you so much, Andre. In fact, I was about to say something and then you said I'm stopping. Thank you so much for that. Friends, we had three very interesting presentations four different very interesting presentations from different dimensions. Sergey has spoken to us about philosophical contemplation as a form of philosophical practice. And then we had Patrizia, who spoke on philosophy as the best practice. She is truly advocating the philosophical practice to be the best one. And because this is important, because in the previous panel discussion, we had an argument saying that philosophers cannot be the counselors. So that is how, in that context, this presentation takes its core. And then we also had the journey of Dr. Vasile from philosophy as a practice to a profession in Romania, followed by Andre's interesting presentation along with the case studies, as Patrizia has done, talking about core issues involved in the philosophical counseling of business executives. And he argued vehemently that, in fact, it helps, philosophical counseling helps them in making meaningful and relevant decisions, by addressing these core philosophical issues of autonomy, responsibility, and integrity. And now the paper, all the 4 papers are open for discussion. If you have any questions, I see Pepe raising his hand. Over to you, Pepe.
Thank you very much for all your presentation, because I think that they are very compelling, and we are making that we think a lot. I have several questions for some of you. The first one is for Sergey. I asked him by chat, and I said, what is the goal of deep philosophy? I mean, why should I go to a deep philosophy session? Even I have been attending on them, but I would like to know what is your position about that. Patrizia, I am very delightful that you talk a lot about philosophers, because in some occasion we talk a lot about philosophical counselors, but if we are doing philosophical counseling, I think that we have talked about Kant and the like. So thank you very much. But I have a couple of questions. First of all, you have talked about the efficacy of philosophical practice and philosophical counseling. And I concur with you, I agree with you that it is very important, but in some occasions we said philosophical counseling is very important because it develops critical thinking. As you said, it makes that we have a more clear idea of our problems or the like. But I don't know what do you think about to make research studies in order to know the efficacy of philosophical practice? And what do you think about our main problems to develop those research projects? Because in my opinion, philosophers don't have the skills to develop that research projects, qualitative and quantitative projects. And I think that it could be very, very interesting. For Vasile, thank you very much, Vasile. I am looking for your conference in Romania. And I have 2 questions. First of all, what do you think about interdisciplinary work in philosophical practice? What do you think about working in philosophical practice with psychologists or with people from education and the like? Because I think that it could be interesting, but I would like to know what do you think about it. And second, this is a question for you, for Vasile, and even for you, for Balaganapathi. And the question is, what do you know if in Romania or in India are there people working with people at social risk? As you know, I am working in prison and in other countries, and I would like the situation in Romania and in India, since you are holder or director of international conference and national association. So is there people working with people, if there are some philosophical counselor and practitioners working with people at social risks? And at the end, for Andret, I think that it is very important to work with institutions, but I have a problem that is with cosification or the capitalism in some institution. I know that an institution could be an NGO, an association for working with poor people, for example, but an organization could be a place that turns a person into a thing, a human resource. So we have worked with some institution here in Seville, but I remember an institution, a great company in Seville, that asked for me to make some workshops in order to make their workers more productive. They said, no, Pepe, our idea is that our workers are more happy. But the idea is that they wanted them more happier in order they are more productive. So what do you think about that thing? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pepe, for those questions. And we'll go in the same order, like Sergey, and then Patrizia, and then Dr. Vasile, and then Andre. Yeah, please. Over to you, Sergey.
Okay, thank you, Pepe, for your questions. It's really the main questions, because what is the goal of the PE sessions and what should the person to go? And it may seem strange, but many people are not satisfied with this normal life. It's in this everyday life, it's in its well-being, it's all good, all well, but something lack of. And this feeling of emptiness, because that's lifestyle in everyday life. It's not have the opportunity to satisfy this emptiness. What is the source of this emptiness? Subjectivity, authenticity, and of this subjectivity, authenticity arise the question in philosophical character. But this question is in everyday life, it's some excess, redundance. But this question, it's not the psychological problem, not my problem, but it's emptiness, something opportunity I feel to fulfill my life. And this question I have the opportunity to share with the group and to understand who am I, who am my subjectivity, who am my authenticity, because my social mask, my social role not give me the answer for this question. And this, I think, the main goal of the PE session, to understand what is my subjectivity and give philosophy as a form of practice this subjectivity, authenticity.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me, Jose? Pepe? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, well, yes. Well, first of all, thanks for your sharing the value of quoting philosophers and sources and books, because we are philosophers and we based what we are now on what we have studied and our love for philosophy and for books. And it's important, because if we invite our client to begin in a fascinating pathway like the one of philosophy, which may help them to face life in a happier way or in a more satisfying way, of course we have to share our tools, our roots, and that's fundamental for me. Even going on to study, that's fundamental as well. I have my favorite authors, of course. I go back to them, and of course every time I read them again, it's something new comes out, and it's beautiful, of course, as you can understand, of course. But or even new authors, and contemporary philosophy is such an amazing and interesting world, because of course we face contemporaries and world is changing so fast. So yeah, I find fundamental as well. Going to the second part of your question, if our role as philosophers in research, like my project of, in a way of coming with a guideline based on a sort of a scientific research. Well, first of all, I can share with you that in the last 2-3 years, I followed a couple of research projects. So I had my role as philosopher, and other had the role as statistics or scientific people regarding the different topics. They were two projects. One was about an environmental issue, a big one, the presence of nature in our urban cities, which is a philosophical matter as well. The relationship between culture and nature, and even an existential problem, because we need to have a sort of natural dimension, even if we live in a big urban society. It's an aesthetic problem, and it's a health issue, of course, and so on. So philosophy has an enormous role, because some issues like aesthetics, like peace of mind, like even the peace of mind, state of mind, and projectuality, how to project new spaces where human being can feel better. So these are philosophical. So even from the starting of the project, so when we had to start writing down the problem, the project, of course, statistics took their contribution with data. So numbers and numbers regarding square meters of garden compared to cement in towns, but even data regarding how many people suffer from asthma or from lung illnesses. And so they did their job, and mathematical, and I did my job as a philosopher, grading the issues, the most urgent, the most interesting, the most promising of research. And then, for example, when we had to compile, to write a questionnaire, putting the right question to the citizen, for example, because of course the research project was based on interviews. So which were the most interesting question, the one that we could use to formulate a new project of, that could make people work together, architects, medical doctors, philosophers, research, university, academics, so different type of profession. So we can play our role as member of a team developing new project linked to our contemporary lives. So philosophy has a very strong role in this way, under a methodology point of view, because questionnaire is part of a research project. And then how you read the question and how you interpret the answers. The view of a philosopher can go deep and understand what the person was meaning, comparing with the other. So it's a role of evaluation, of accent, of sense. So they're all philosophical problems. And then, of course, the cluster, how to create a cluster, how to prioritize object. And then, of course, all the analysis that I'm doing with my guideline, the retrospective literature, the examination. So going back and see how many, for example, in my example, which is not the European project, the Horizon 2020 that I did, but how many philosophers practice philosophical counseling in this way, and how many other in that way, and what do they say about that? And is there any opinion of the client which is gathered or not? What about the feedbacks? Because of course our practice as a philosophers is a dialogic practice, is a communicative practice. So we should close the circle of our practice with a question. What do you think about that? Because we are engaged in this relationship. And that's very important. The experience is changing for the client, but for ourselves as well. And the opinion of the client in a real deep way, not in a marketer well, of course, not at all, even so, but it's very important. So what has she thought about that, or he thought about that? Which kind of experience? And so you see, since the beginning, retrospective analysis of the previous literature, the scientific literature, through the text of the project, forward to the questionnaires, the creation of clusters, the interview, the organizing of meeting in-present meetings. Philosophers can really play a role of facilitator, of putting together different voices, creating the right climate and space in terms of time and logistic to facilitate people to speak and to express themselves, not to be shy, not to be fearful, to trust themselves to come out. So we can play an important role in all this. Of course, in collaboration with,
Yeah, just one thing. Anyway, when I was in Yale University or Harvard University, I discovered the experimental philosophy, and they are working with social science methods, and even we are working in a research, in a qualitative research. The research is not just quantitative; it could be qualitative, and there you can work with interviews and with another models. But the problem is that philosophers normally didn't study those methods. So
yes, we
I think that
it
is a good challenge for us. That's all.
Yeah, I agree with you, Pepe. It's a great challenge for us. Thank you. Thank you much. Thank you very much for your question. That's been a great question.
Professor Vasile, would you like to?
Yes. Thank you, Jose, for your questions. About the first questions about the interdisciplinary confrontation of philosophical practice of philosophical counseling, I think that area can our practice can be alone in the I found in my research some fields we interact with our practice. Here I can speak about the scientific fields about natures or bioethics or ecology or environment. I wrote last year's 2 papers about promoting eco-dialogue using the eco-philosophy concept in protecting the environment. We interact with in organizational field like consultancies on ethics counseling. We interacting with spiritual counseling, and we need the make unique work in this area. And about the second questions, I want to tell you, we have in Romania the special program and on research about philosophical counseling in prison. And I hope so this year will be finished PhD thesis with this topic, will be presented in our university. And we have included in our master program a special discipline about the philosophical counseling in prison. And my intention for the futures is to make a special project destined for senior facility, for seniors persons. They need too much the philosophy to using in their life. And that can be another section for our intention in the futures. The philosophical counseling applied in the senior fields.
Thank you.
Andrew, would you like to respond?
Hello. Yes, sure. Hello, Pepe. Always a pleasure to see you. Thank you very much for the question. So just to check that I understood it right, you were pointing to your impression, which I think is a fact, that working in institutions with philosophical practice, philosophical counseling, can be problematic. And I agree with that. I think that's basically right. I still would treat this case by case. I think there are particular cases but you can imagine, I think, once we are working with companies, with businesses, some situations will be just even hard to speak, it's just some things that are really out of line. And what happens, a common thing that will happen in businesses is sometimes, in an important sense, it is the HR department of the company that is hiring you, that is hiring the service. And they have their goals. Their specific goals to be met. And sometimes those goals will not take into account neither a basic respectful interaction, but most importantly, I think, the development of the group, like the actual benefits for the group that you are working with. And they will try sometimes to kind of direct your work in such a way that you do the dirty work for them in some sense. I absolutely agree with that. I think there is indeed that kind of objectification of people, both of the executives that we would be working with and of ourselves as an instrument for people to reach whatever it is that they're looking for. At the same time, I would say, and I insist on that point, it actually varies from case to case. In other companies, sometimes even large corporations, people are very open, that you make an agreement, they give you a general sense of what they expect. If that is something that you are comfortable with and you can deliver, you are free to do it whichever way you like. And it's lovely when that happens. So very recently, December last year, I had a full day session on autonomy with a group of executives. And I thought that was actually very brave from the perspective of the company to invite a philosopher to talk about autonomy in a large corporation where everything is so controlled and structured and planned. And so we challenged that. And I had all the freedom to address that however I wanted. So I totally agree that there is a risk, an important risk, and I would say there is a risk even to our own integrity as professionals. And I think for me, that is not for sale. So sometimes I will position myself in a way that doesn't please the client, let's say. But that's with them, maybe they need something else. I don't mind, I also had, like in November, I had a course canceled because they wanted me to talk about something. And when I explained to them how I was going to approach that topic, they literally just thanked me very much and canceled the course before it even took place. So yeah, you're right, it's tricky. It's a challenge, and I think it is our job to be very conscious of that and kind of protect both our own integrity and the integrity of the students, the seekers, the participants. I take as a principle that my focus, my main source of commitment is always with the seeker or the student and not with the HR or whoever it is that is actually paying me to do that job. I think that simplifies things a lot. My commitment is with whoever I'm working within that institution. But yeah, you're right. It's a real
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for that response, Andre. And from my side, Pepe, basically philosophical counseling, the practice of philosophical counseling, forget about the philosophical counseling as a profession, which is very far away from us now. Practice of philosophical counseling itself is at a very nascent stage. Though we had an organization called purely devoted for philosophical counseling, which was established almost 20 years back, but at the public level, among the people, it did not come out so much. So only in the recent past, probably with the contribution of pandemic, philosophical counseling is gaining its prominence, and it also is people have understood its relevance, in the present time. So slowly it is coming up, and we have to look forward to our philosophy friends, youngsters, and coming forward and working with people of high risk, social risk. So probably that's like future prospect for us. But thank you so much for raising this interesting concern. In fact, I was about to enter into a project on spinal cord injuries, injured patients, their worldview, etc. But these are all like evolving slowly. So probably after some time they would get materialized. But thank you so much for pointing out these. And I think we should give last chance to Yash, and then we have to close because we will have the last session of the day, which is valedictory around 7 o'clock. Yash, please go ahead with your question, but please be brief.
Yeah, I will be brief. I would like to thank all the presenters for the amazing presentation and quite insightful. I just want to share my experience. I don't really have a question, but it's just about with reference to the work done by Professor Andre. I have been working with some organization where I've done some kind of philosophical audit. I call it philosophical audit, where I've focused mainly on organizational ontologies. So 3 themes I've worked on. Those are organizational ontologies, organizational consciousness, and alignment of values with mission, vision, and objectives of institutions, purely from philosophical perspective. And one of the challenges that I've faced is clash between, personal values and organizational values. I would agree with Patrizia when she mentions that people from other fields. I'm not disrespecting other people from other fields, but I'm agreeable with Patrizia when she said that philosophers go deeply, and my experience suggests that this is the kind of thing that is required in organizations. Because if you're not aligned with values, if there's no consensus in terms of consciousness level of the organization, then definitely it will affect productivity, it will affect turnover rate. So I would invite practitioners to also consider working with organizations. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you a lot. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, it's more a comment rather than a question. So if any of you would like to briefly respond, that's fine. Otherwise, we'll there is one more hand that I see here. Morsalin, let's allow her question. But Morsalin, my request is to you to be brief, please.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. I have a little question that if a client don't believe that philosophical counseling can help her, then how can I approach her? And is it possible to actually help her?
So would you like to respond, any of you? Patrizia, probably? Yeah.
Yes, I can quote a line from the presentation that I had to rush quickly. When Sergio, the boy the student, the depressed student that wasn't attending the university any longer, not taking tests, feeling bad, feeling tired, so slightly depressed, came to me. He asked me, how do you think that philosophy can help me? And then, of course, I quoted, among others, of course, Seneca in a letter to Lucilius, particularly the one entitled On Philosophy, the Guide of Life, when he says, philosophy is not a way to amuse our mind, but an exercise to guide our actions and mold our souls. So this is, of course, this is the answer of Seneca to the young, at the beginning, skeptical friend Lucilius. But we haven't to convince our clients. We have to begin with a dialogue. We go on just questioning about life, questioning about meaning of our actions, questioning about who are you and where are you going and what do you think and what are your beliefs? And we share our thoughts and our considerations. And then, of course, our tools, like a surgeon in an operational room, are philosophers and philosophical thoughts, which is so wide and huge and broad that really we can find many, many things. And even looking at the future anyway, we look in the past and we take our inspiration and our sources from the history of philosophy, but we go further, like with Jose Barrientos, we were exchanging, we go on. So we don't have to convince our client. And actually a client who is already come to us in a way as a sort of questioning about his or her life and what matters or what doesn't matter. And so we can start from that. If the question is, if your question is a question of how to convince skeptical people, that's a problem of even marketing. I mean, you have to promote the value of philosophy. You have to spread the message. You have to use all the even contemporary means. I'm not very good at that really, but anyway, I use social means as private ones. Actually, I prefer to just to dialogue with my school friends when I was in high school instead of making a promotion. And actually, I've been working more in the last year on words of mouth. So people who comes and then a friend and then, so I had quite a number of clients because people just spread out the being useful, our role as being useful. So that's my answer actually.
Thank you so
thank
much.
you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Pleasure. Pleasure.
And,
thank you for your question.
Yeah, I'm sure all of you would agree with me if I say we really had a very engaging and engaging session with these 4 scholars who have joined us today. This is the last panel discussion. In fact, before the valedictory, this is the last session that we have of this conference. Thank you so very much, Dr. Sergey and Dr. Andre and Dr. Vasile and Patrizia for joining us. And it's really an honor to be a chair of this particular session and welcome you and listen to you all. And we really look forward to your cooperation and collaborations further as well. And it is, in fact, an open invitation that we got from, official open invitation that we have got from Dr. Vasile for this international conference on philosophical practice, which is going to happen from during June 2023. And we all, let us pray and hope that the restrictions that we have would be removed by then and we can physically be present at Romania and enjoy the place there along with the feast of deliberations of philosophical practitioners. So with that hope, I thank you once again, all of you, and also the participants and people who have asked their questions and silently listened to the deliberations. Thank you all. And let us, I request all of you to join us back at 7 p.m. India time for the valedictory. Professor Lou Marinoff would be joining us and he would be giving a valedictory address. So I request all of you to come back and join us at 7 p.m. India time. Thank you so much.